What's up, everybody? I'm TK. Welcome to another Unstoppable Sunday. Here at Unstoppable, we help you become the best version of yourself by living a more proactive life. Today, on this Sunday, I'm gonna help you plan out your week ahead so that instead of feeling that pit in your stomach on a Sunday afternoon, instead of feeling the Sunday jitters, the Sunday scaries, or instead of feeling that Monday morning dread or counting down through the work week just for the weekend to come so you can get back on that hamster wheel again, instead of doing all of that, I'm gonna help you feel empowered, I'm gonna help you feel proactive, I'm gonna help you live through the next week so that you can get closer to achieving the goals that you want out of yourself. I'm super pumped about this. We're gonna have a lot of fun. I'm gonna be with you through every step of the way for this practice that I call Unstoppable Sunday. It takes about 30 minutes. I'm gonna walk you through it. Let's get started. I'm super pumped. So first, let's talk about why. Let's talk about why we're here. You're here because you're probably like me. You wanna become the best version of yourself. You wanna accomplish certain goals in your life. You wanna make the most of your time here, however long it may be. We all wanna live productive lives. We all wanna make an impact. We all wanna give back. We all wanna be able to provide for ourselves and our family and our significant others. That's why we're here, right? But at the same time, despite our intentions, and this happened to me, despite our intentions to be the best version of ourselves and do more, life tests us. Life tests us with throwing us obstacles, challenges, problems, things sometimes even beyond our control. On a Sunday afternoon is when we're most vulnerable around it. Think about it. We had the weekend, we had some downtime, we probably had some good times with friends and family, and all of a sudden you just feel that pit in your stomach. I felt this. And you're going into Monday, and that commute into work on a Monday morning, you're like, oh my God. So you got the Sunday jitters and the Sunday scares, you got the Monday dread and that existential, what am I even doing with my life? I want you to know that I've been there before, but this one thing changed about a decade ago, nearly a decade ago. I started doing this one thing every Sunday that completely changed that experience for me. I started doing this one thing where I would just sit down for 30 minutes and ask myself these two questions. Number one, where am I? And number two, what do I do next? By following this simple exercise, which I'm gonna walk you through right after this, it helped me get more centered about the week ahead. It helped me get more proactive in my life. It helped me punch those Sunday jitters and those Sunday scaries in the face, helped me reduce my anxiety, and helped me go into Monday with a plan. It allowed for me to go from having weeks where I'm just hoping for it to be over to counting down to the weekend, to weeks where I felt empowered, where I had a plan, where I felt like, no, I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm here, I feel empowered, I know what I'm fighting for, and I enjoyed my week, I enjoyed the journey. And little by little, one unstoppable Sunday at a time, one productive week at a time, I completely changed the trajectory of my life. I want you to feel this way too. Can you imagine how great it'll feel to go through the work week knowing that you've got a game plan that all ties together? Can you imagine what it's gonna feel like on a Monday headed into work when you're feeling like, okay, no, I got this. Like, I've got a plan, instead of just being afraid of what's gonna come out of the bushes and attack you? Can you imagine what's gonna feel on a Wednesday? Instead of counting down to the happy hour on Thursday, you're like, no, my God, I've accomplished so much. I'm working on the right things. And can you imagine what it's gonna feel like on a Sunday, the Sunday after, when you look back and think of how much you got done, how you got that balance between your work life and your personal life, and you're working on the right things. There's no anxiety because you're like, no, here are problems, here are solutions, here's what I'm doing, I've got a plan, and no one freaks out when there's a plan. Can you imagine how good that's gonna feel? I'm gonna teach you how to get to that state. I got to that state by practicing Unstoppable Sunday. I'm gonna walk you through it in this session. The way it works is that you set aside 30 minutes every Sunday, whether it's a Sunday afternoon, a Sunday morning, Sunday night, whatever works for you. Sunday's a good time because it's a good reset to the coming week. It's an opening for a new beginning, a new way of approaching things. The same way New Year's works and birthdays work, Sundays are the same, except they come a lot more frequently. So I set aside 30 minutes every Sunday and I sit down in front of my computer or my notebook and I answer these two questions. Number one, where am I? And number two, what do I do next? These are very specific questions. They work for very specific reasons. Number one, the reason they work is because it gets you to acknowledge where you are. So often on a Sunday, we're just sitting there and we're just telling stories to ourselves. We're building that anxiety in ourselves. I'm like, oh my God, this might go wrong, or what if this happens? And we're just playing it all out in our head. By answering where am I, it helps you get it all out on the table and process it. And then once you've got it all on the table, by answering what do I do next, it helps you own it. It helps you own the situation. Good or bad, great, whatever it is, helps you own it and say, all right, that's the situation, I'm gonna own it, what do I do? How do I spend the next 7 days? There are nuances to this, and I'm gonna do this with you. We're gonna practice Unstoppable Sunday together so I can walk you through on how to practice it. It's a really simple exercise, and by doing this for 30 minutes every Sunday, it helped me take a more proactive view on life. It helped me get off the hamster wheel where I was just holding my breath and counting down to the weekends. It helped me just punch those Sunday jitters in the face. For those of you that aren't listening to this in the Unstoppable Life app, we created an app for this to make this all super easy. You can go to getunstoppable.com/app. And this guided session will play, and we'll have all the tools for you necessary to actually answer these questions. If you don't want to use the app, feel free to just use a notebook, whatever works for you. The most important thing is that you actually go through these 2 questions the way I teach you to in the next few minutes. So first, let's tackle where am I? So often on a Sunday, we're kind of just sitting there and we're playing out all these stories in our head. We're worried about things that haven't even happened yet, or we're worried about things that have happened and we don't even know how to deal with it. That's what I call the Sunday jitters and the Sunday scaries. And the problem with that is we're kind of just sitting there letting it all play out in our head, and that's not a very good place for us to actually process things and deal with things. You just make it 10 times worse, you don't do anything about it, and then you're unprepared as you go into Monday. So for this first question, the whole point of it is to just get it all out on paper or on the screen or basically out of your head. Where am I? Just answering that. And to help you get started, I'll give you some prompts on the type of things that you need to kind of think about and write down related to where you are right now. Let's get started. So first, let's tackle the easy stuff in terms of where am I. Let's just tackle what you're feeling. And I don't mean this to be touchy-feely and go look, you're feeling things. Just acknowledge it and get it out. Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling anxious? What is it that you're feeling and why? Just write it down. You don't have to solve anything here. You don't have to solve anything in this section. You don't have to do anything about it. You just want to acknowledge it. Acknowledge what's going through your head and just get it all out. I'm going to give you a few seconds as you think through that, and I'll come right back to you for the next set of prompts. We'll give about 15 seconds. We'll come back to it. And by the way, as you're working through these, I'm going to go through a bunch of these prompts, and I don't want to rush you through it, so I'll give you some gaps, but you can always come back. I want to get through the basic version of this with a few seconds for you to think about it, just so you get the full picture, and then you can always come back to it and do it yourself, and you can replay parts of this video. So I don't want you to feel rushed, but I do want to cover all the sections of this. Okay, as you start to think about what you're feeling and where are you right now, let's dig in a little bit more and talk through what are the things that are bothering us. So often these jitters and these scaries and the dread kicks in because of negative aspects of our life. So I'm not saying you gotta solve it and you can solve it in a week, doesn't matter. Let's just acknowledge it. What are the things that are bothering you? What are the negative aspects of your life that are on top of mind for you? What are the things that are not going well, that you're unhappy about? Let's just write those down. It's not about solving it, it's all about acknowledging it and getting it out. So let's take a few seconds and write down what are the negative aspects of our life that are top of mind for us right now. I'll give you a few seconds to think through that, and then we'll keep going. As you think through this, think about, are there things coming up in the work week, a meeting or something related to your work that's weighing on you or bothering you or you don't quite know how to handle? Is there something in your personal life that is not going the direction you want it to go and it's bothering you? You haven't been able to have the conversation around it. Is there a big meeting that you don't feel prepared for? Is there something that you don't know? You don't, literally don't know how to deal with it? Just write it down, it's okay, just acknowledge it. The biggest thing I tell people is these are just problems, and problems have solutions. So often we try to acknowledge the problem and solve it in the same way, and that's what really holds us back. In this scenario, don't worry about what the solution is, don't worry whether you can solve it, and maybe you can't, just acknowledge it. And I found that just acknowledging the problem and getting it out there and getting it on the table goes a really long way. So write down all the negative aspects, all the things that are weighing on you in terms of where you are right now. I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, so in terms of where am I, we've talked about what am I feeling, what are the negative aspects. One of the things that I realized over the last 10 years is so quickly when Sunday rolls around, we jump into the next week. We start thinking about the next set of problems. We start thinking about all the things that are ahead. So quickly, we forget the past, even the recent past. And so in terms of where am I want you to take a few seconds and jot down the last 7 days. Or the last 14 days. What are the things that went well? What were moments where you were like really grateful? You laughed really hard, or you smiled, or you spent time with someone that meant a lot to you, or you crushed a meeting, or you finished a project. Let's talk about the things that went really well over the last 7 days, and let's just acknowledge that. Because very quickly on a Sunday, our minds start going into the future and all the things that might go wrong. And we forget, like, we might have had a really great weekend. That barbecue might have been awesome. Or that meeting, you like crushed it there. Let's acknowledge those things. Like, what are the things, small wins, big wins, moments where you felt grateful? What are those things? Let's just write those down in terms of where am I right now? Because it's important to acknowledge that. I'll give you a few seconds and then we'll keep moving. Okay, now that we're still in this where am I section, okay? We're not going to the second one yet. Now that we've acknowledged like what you're feeling, like what's weighing on you, the good and the bad, the things that you're grateful for in the last 7 days, now let's look ahead. We're not trying to solve for anything, but let's just look ahead. In the next 7 days, what are the things you're excited about? What are the things that you're looking forward to? What are the things where you're gonna be doing this week that you from 5 years ago, if they knew you were doing this like today, they would be like, oh my God, that's awesome. Like, I'm so pumped for you. You might think it's like every other day, but you from 5 years ago would be super proud of you. What are those things? What are those things that you can look ahead and look forward to in the coming 7 days? Let's like jot that down. What are things you're thankful for that you're gonna be able to experience in the next 7 days? Okay, now remember, you can come back to this later. I just wanna make sure I give you a tour of the whole thing, and you can come back and tweak it and add more to it, so don't feel rushed. The next thing I want you to think about, again, this is part of where am I, is what are the negative aspects of the coming week? And like, what are the things you're worried about? What are the things that's giving you a pit in the stomach? What are the things you feel like you're unprepared for? Sometimes I've had weeks where I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to, just cancel everything because this is gonna be a horrible week. I have to deal with horrible things. That's okay. It's just acknowledge it, put it out there, and just write it down. It's like, I remember there was this one time I knew like I had to do layoffs in my company. And on that Sunday I was doing that, I'm like, this is gonna be horrible. And I knew it was gonna be horrible and there's nothing I could do about it. I had to do it, but just writing it out, even the act of writing it out and getting it out there helped me feel better about the reality, about acknowledging the situation. It's like, yep, this sucks, this is horrible, but I'm gonna have to figure out a way to get forward on it. And I did. I did get past it. And it worked out fine in the long run. Take a few seconds. What are the negative aspects of the coming week that are bothering you? If there aren't any, awesome, keep going, this is great. But if there are, that's life, let's acknowledge it. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, cool. So first of all, that was the first part of this practice. Where am I? I just wanna take a moment and acknowledge the fact that you spent a few minutes to pause on a Sunday and just acknowledge where am I. puts you in an elite group of people on planet Earth. It just does. So many of us, most of us, majority of my life, I just pummeled right into a Monday. And I didn't know why I felt the jitters and the scaries and the dread. I didn't take time to pause and reflect and think about the week ahead. And you just did that. You don't have to solve anything. The fact that you just process through what's going on in a healthy way, and you start to think about like, well, these are the good, these are the bad, these are the things to be grateful for, here's what happened last week. Like, think of how much farther ahead you are, just subconsciously and consciously, on how you're gonna approach this coming week. I'm super pumped for you. Like, this was the first part, and just the first part of 2 parts, but this alone, can you imagine if you do this every Sunday, how much of a better week you're gonna have, because you just acknowledge what's going on in a healthy way instead of just trying to escape it. I did this for the last 10 years, and it was like, within the first couple of times I did it, it was eye-opening to me, because I was like, oh my God, like, I already feel better, and I haven't even solved anything yet. Speaking of which, that's where this next part comes in. So now that you've acknowledged where you are, which is half the battle, if not more, the second is, what do I do next? The way you get to living a more proactive life is you acknowledge where you are, and then you say, all right, well, there are certain things I can do something about, there are other things I can't do anything about, but how do I go and run the play? I look at life as a bank heist. I look at every week like a bank heist. And when you're doing a bank heist, if you have a plan, you have the right team, and you measure it the right way, and you go attack it in the right way, and you have the right strategy, you can go reap great rewards. You don't want to go into a bank blindfolded, and that's how I look at the week. So now that you've acknowledged where am I, I'm gonna now work through what do I do next. I'm gonna walk you through some of the prompts that you can follow to start to think about how you get proactive about the next 7 days of your life. I don't want to overcomplicate this, and nor should you. Don't think about the whole year. Don't think about where am I going with life. Look, all we're trying to do right now is plan out your week. It's Sunday, the next 7 days. Let's have an awesome next 7 days. That's what we're trying to do here. The rest will come later. Okay, so what do I do next? Now, the first thing I want us to tackle is, if you look back at where am I, let's identify the big, hairy, bad things that are ahead. Let's like look at those right away and start to think about like, all right, those are the big, hairy things. I want you to acknowledge those and start to think through, what do you do about it? Now, there are a few different ways this can go. One, you can't do anything about it. You just have to mentally prepare. It's a bad situation. Fine, go do that. Write down like, all right, I gotta do this. It's gonna be terrible, but if I do it right, here are the good things that are gonna happen out of it. Or I just need to go just like grunt through it. Now, there may be other cases where you need to deal with it, but there's maybe a better way to deal with it. There's maybe a more proactive way of dealing with it. Maybe there's a more resourceful way of dealing with it. So first thing I want you to do is look through the big things that are bothering you and start to map out like, what can I do in this next 7 days? And if I look ahead just a little bit, not too much, if I take a broader view on it, what are the things that I can do to start to acknowledge these things? What do I do about this? Good or bad? Go do that. I'll give you a few seconds and then we'll keep moving. As you think through this, think about what are the steps, big or small, that you can take to start to change this bad thing that's there, or this thing that you're worried about. Maybe you can't do it all in 1 week. What are the big steps that you can take over the next few weeks? Maybe lay them out and say, all right, if I do these 5 things over the next 5 weeks, let's just start with this one small thing this week. Start to think about that. This is gonna turn into a little bit of an action plan for yourself for this week and then beyond. Next Sunday, you're gonna look at this action plan, you're gonna see what you did, and you're gonna course correct, and you're gonna create a new action plan. So it becomes super easy for you to look back, say what you said you did, and then tether yourself to that, and then expand on that. So just write it all out, make it your own. What's most important is that you acknowledge what's going on, which is what you did in the first section, and then say, what do I do next this week and beyond? I'll give you a few more seconds, keep going. Okay, so now that you have acknowledged where am I, and you've started to acknowledge like, what do I do next about the big blockers that I have and the big things that are kind of coming at me, I want you to open up your calendar for the coming week. Hopefully you keep a calendar. One of my favorite sayings is, show me a calendar and I'll show you your priorities. It's incredibly true. So Now is a good time as you think about the next 7 days and thinking about being more proactive in your life. Open up your calendar. Let's just take a look at what you've got coming up ahead. I'll give you a few seconds as you open that up and start taking a look. And I want you to kind of take a step back and kind of look at, all right, here's my calendar. Here's what I'm feeling and what I'm worried about. Here's what I'm gonna start to do next week to make sure I address the big things that I've got. But here's also my commitments that I've got. So you kind of got these 3 things you're looking at, all right? Let's take a few seconds, go through that, and then I'll give you the next step. The reality is our calendar dictates our priorities. It literally manages how we're gonna spend our time. And when we don't proactively manage our calendar and what we're gonna spend our time on, that's when we get that anxiety. That's when we get that pit in our stomach. We get that pit in our stomach because A, we don't have a plan on things that might go wrong or things we're worried about, or B, we know we're not gonna be able to get to it all. And so the thing that I want you to do now is just take a look at your calendar, take a look at the big things that you need to do, and in your proactive plan, in your what do I do next, and in your calendar, start to make some decisions. What are the things that you can deprioritize? What can wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or maybe never? Maybe it'll require a little bit of a tough conversation with a person. It's like, look, I can't hang out or I can't do this, but you know for yourself and for your own priorities and the things that are important to you, the things that are giving you anxiety or makes you happy, it's gonna be more important for you to do that instead of this thing. So the first thing I want you to look at is like in your calendar in the next 7 days, what can you deprioritize? What can you take off and cancel? Because it's honestly not as important as some of these other things that are more important, particularly things around like the big blockers that are giving you anxiety and what you need to do around those. Secondly, I want you to ask yourself, do I have time to address the most important things? Whether it's the big things that are bothering you and what you need to do around that, or things that are important to you, the things that like make you feel good. Do you have time for those? So what are the trade-offs? Life and strategy, all of it is about trade-offs. It's about making choices. It's about saying no to this so you can say yes to this because this is better and this is worse. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard, and I get that, but you're not gonna stand a chance if you don't try. And so try. I want you to take a few seconds and look at what do you deprioritize? Are you prioritizing the most important things? And what should your calendar look like just for the next 7 days? What do you wanna prioritize over the next 7 days so that a Sunday from now, 7 days from now, you look back and you're like, I feel good. Like I've worked on the right things and I feel like I'm in a better position to take on this next week because I prioritized the right things. I'll give you a few seconds. The way I usually do this, by the way, is I just write down like, I'm literally not gonna do these things. I'm gonna get rid of it from my calendar and I'm gonna focus on these things. I'm gonna go do this, this, and this. I just write it in my what do I do next section. And then when I'm all done, I update my calendar and talk to the people and let everyone know. So just at this point, just make the decisions, write them down. Okay, as you're thinking through that, I wanna ask you one more thing to think through, okay? When you think about, remember the part where with Where Am I, we looked back and we thought about like, what made you feel good in the last 7 days? Like practice gratitude, like what went well, what were moments where you smiled or laughed really hard, or you spent time with someone that you like absolutely love spending time with? Did you like go out with your family, your significant other? So go back to that. Can you do a little bit more of that in this coming 7 days? See, if the 7 days, every 7 days is just a grind, and we don't even spend 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, find an hour. One less hour of Netflix, one more hour for ourselves. If you can find an hour to go do a little bit more of that and you plan that in, what will the next 7 days look like for you? So as you're thinking about prioritizing and saying no to things and saying yes to things, in terms of what do I do next, ask yourself, what is the thing last week that I felt really good about? I love doing it. Can I do more of that? Or what is the thing I wish I did? And can I go prioritize that in? What would I have to give up? Do I give up my Netflix time? Do I give up my going out time at night so that I can go do this thing for myself? Whatever it is, think about that for a second and bake that into your next 7-day plan as well. Look, even if it's 10 minutes, go do it for yourself. Go for a 10-minute walk. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe it's allocating 10 minutes of reading a book. Maybe you like take the book to the restroom with you for all I care. But let's prioritize that in for yourself. Keep going, I'll give you a few more seconds. The last thing I want you to think about in terms of what do I do next is I want you to take a step back and just take a little bit of a broader view, okay? Just for a second. I want you to ask yourself, like, what are the things that I need to do this week so that I'm set up for my long-term success? The next year. What are my like yearly goals? Or the person I want to be 5 years from now? Are there little things that I can do this week? Maybe it's like getting to a better health by the end of this year. Maybe it's getting into better shape. Or maybe it's switching my career to a different track, and so I want to start learning or networking with certain groups of people. So I want you to ask yourself that, like take a little bit of like I force you to think about the next 7 days and only the next 7 days. But for just like 30 seconds, think about a little bit broader, the next year, 365 days, or the next 5 years. If you take that view, what are the things you need to do or you want to do this week? Just to set an intention, just to say, I want to think about this, or I want to meet this person, or I want to go to this one event, just so for my year goal or my 5-year vision, I can actually get a little bit closer. I'll give you a few seconds to think about that as well. I'll be right back. Okay, so let me just recap what we did. Number one, we talked about where am I? Wrote it all down. Number two, we talked about what do I do next? And we wrote it all down. So now you have this thing that processes what you're feeling, and then has this thing like decides on what you're gonna do about it. And now, if you look ahead in the next 7 days, you're actually taking a very conscious approach to the next 7 days. You've hopefully deprioritized some things. You've hopefully prioritized the right things. You've thought through how you're gonna attack some problems that you've got. You've thought about how you're gonna make some time for yourself. And you've thought about a little bit around, well, where is this all headed? Like, where's my life headed? Let's just acknowledge, it is crazy to me that we let human beings run around on planet Earth without teaching them to do this for 30 minutes every Sunday. All right, like, can you imagine? I did this for a decade and it opened up a decade of unparalleled success and productivity for me. Can you imagine if you do this just 2 weekends in a row, 3 weekends, 4 weekends? Think of how you feel right now. You should feel centered. You should feel like, no, like I understand what's going on, and I may not have that solution to all my problems, but at least I've thought through it. At least I've made some choices. At least I know what to expect. At least I've said no to a few things. At least I opened up the possibility of a few new things. All of that is so powerful, and I'm so incredibly pumped for you, because I remember the first time I practiced this and what a difference that coming week made. I'm excited for you to feel that, and hopefully you feel that right now. Hopefully, like the Sunday jitters, you feel like you just punched it in the face. Hopefully as you go into the Monday, you're gonna be like, all right, I got a plan, okay? Everything's not perfect, I don't have an answer for everything, but I got a plan. So let's work on it, all right? So I want you to think about that and just revel in this moment. I'm so excited for you, I'm so pumped for you. I'm proud that you took this step. And just think about what would happen if you do this next Sunday. You look back at all the stuff you wrote and you course correct, and you'd have a slightly better week, and then a better week, and then a better week. Just imagine where that's gonna go. Think about that for a second. Okay, so now to wrap it all up, number one, we talked about where am I? Number two, we talked about what do I do next? Here's what I wanna do to kind of wrap this session up, okay? Number one, I want you to reread it. Reread what you wrote. Because you wrote it down, if you reread it, two things are gonna happen. Number one, you're actually gonna set an intention for the week. You're gonna internalize this, and you're gonna set an intention that this is how I want my week to be. You're gonna be conscious of it. You're gonna say, like, this is how we're gonna roll. Here's what I'm gonna do next, okay? When you do that, you don't even need to print this out. You don't actually need to look at this again. You can if you want to. You can just come back to the app and look at it again. But what this is gonna do is it's gonna install it into your subconscious. Meaning, as you go through the week, as you go into Monday, as you go into Tuesday and Wednesday, you'll remember these choices that you made because you reread it and you internalized it, and it goes into your subconscious. And you're gonna remember to make these prioritization decisions. You're gonna start making decisions you're not even gonna sure, like, well, that makes sense, but then you'll look back and like, oh yeah, I did that because I prioritized that on Sunday. So reread it, plan it in your subconscious, you're gonna have an awesome week. The second thing is schedule next Sunday. Find a time next Sunday, put it in your calendar, and come back here. Well, this app will create the new entry for you. It'll show you your prior entry. You can pause and reflect on where you were last week. You can do this again. This video will be here to guide you again. So schedule it next Sunday. I've done this for 10 years and it's unlocked a tremendous amount of productivity and success for me. And I'm so pumped to see where this takes you. If you have questions, comments, need help, my email is tk@getunstoppable.com. That's tk@getunstoppable.com. So shoot me an email. I'm also on Instagram, TKCater. So Instagram, email, either is fine. You can add me on LinkedIn. I'm TK Cater there as well. Feel free to get in touch with me. I'm here to help you figure out how to live a more proactive life. And just one last thing. As you start to do this every Sunday, you're gonna start to get a handle of your next 7 days. As you start to get a handle of your next 7 days, that last question I asked you about, well, where's this going? How do you little by little change the trajectory of your life to where you wanna be? Long term, a year from now, 5 years from now, where do you wanna be? You're gonna start to answer those questions a little bit more. And so that's when it gets really exciting, and I'll share some resources with you on how to take a longer view on life beyond the 7 days. But right now, I'm super pumped for you to be doing Unstoppable Sunday. This one thing I know will make a huge impact in your life. It did for me. I'm super pumped for your week. Go get them. I'm TK, this is Unstoppable, and I'll see you next Sunday. And remember, everyone needs a strategy for their life, but yours will be unstoppable.